Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Another man took advantage of his wife, but the other man wouldn't stand for it. Today's story will have a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. My life developed according to the classic scenario. I was born into a normal family. I grew up as an only child. Kindergarten, school, university. In my 4th year I met her. Sandra. Love carrot. Marriage. After the 5th year he decided to go into the army for 2 years. My wife stayed home with my son. Maternity leave. Served out. I came back to my family. My wife lived in her own apartment. Parents gave it to her. I was registered in my parents' apartment. The military enlistment office offered me to join the police. I went through a medical examination and a credentials committee. I was hired. I started as an operative in the homicide unit in the Central District Police Department. Then I graduated by correspondence from the Academy of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and began to move up the ranks. The pay was good and regular. I was not a fool either. My wife also went to work a year later. A friend got her a job as an accountant in a construction company. My material income increased almost twice. And so we lived almost 15 years. By that time I was already a lieutenant colonel, deputy chief of department. And then it began. My wife's boss got his nephew to work for him. 25 years old. One marriage. Divorced, had a young son. Paid alimony on him. He had his eye on my wife from day one. And there you go. Flowers, presents, drinking coffee together at lunchtime. Everyone at my wife's work knew about the affair. And they weren't hiding it anymore. They started going on business trips together, delays at work. My foolish girl got into a relationship with her lover. I let my guard down. Once she was on the internet and did not close their page. For some reason I went to my laptop and found their correspondence. And there. Love. When you leave your retard, take your son and come with me and stuff like that. And mine. I can't wait to meet you. They're 11 years apart. Mine's 37. She's a big girl now. But she's really lost her head. Maybe she never had a head. I wondered what to do. Should I call her out? She won't tell the truth anyway. Fight for love, save the family? After what I read in their correspondence was out of the question. And what kind of a fight is that? If a hen fell in love with another man for almost 6 months, not giving a damn even about her son. Like, what's good for the mother is good for the child. For her, I'm just trash that gets in the way of a happy future. But the denouement came all by itself. That day Sandra, as usual, stayed late at work. This had been the order of the day lately. I sat in the kitchen and chewed without appetite. The doorbell rang. Without asking who, I opened. Behind the door stood a young, pumped-up and confident male, an idiot from Sandra's job who had my wife in a relationship with her. Can I come in? My name is... I know who you are. I didn't let him finish. Okay, that'll save time. I'm sleeping with your wife. I'm the actual owner of the company where Sandra works. I don't care if she's married. One way or another, she'll be mine. Especially since she wants it. I've prepared the documents. I'll go over them briefly. This is a petition to the court for divorce. See, your wife has already signed it. This is a court order giving you 24 hours to leave this apartment. Especially since this apartment belongs to Sandra. This is a statement to the police and the prosecutor's office about the abuse of your wife and child. You, it turns out, are a family tyrant and regularly beat your wife and child. Mind you, there are witnesses. He rustled through the papers and continued. Do you know which way this is going, Uncle? I'll have you so swamped with lawsuits you won't be able to budge. You'll give up in the end, when you don't have a penny left to get the world's worst lawyer. And you know what? The whole time I'll be having a night with your wife. Yes, I can see that you're bigger and stronger than me. But you have to understand that Neanderthals don't rule the world anymore. Brains overcame brawn years ago. He looked at me silently for a while. But I have a proposition for you. Let's just keep the status quo, okay? Let's leave everything the way it was. I'll continue to have Sandra whenever I want, and you'll sleep with her whenever she wants. Just like the last 6 months. Why make waves and stir things up around here? Someday I'll get tired of her, and then she'll be all yours again. I listened to his monologue without saying a word. Let's face it, if you were what she needed, I wouldn't be here now, would I? My advice is just accept it and leave your wife alone. I took her away from you because I was the alpha male, and I knew from the beginning how this would end and how I would deal with her and you. I felt the primal rage of a man who not wanted his woman taken away from him build up inside my stomach. Anger was coursing through my veins, gradually penetrating my brain. The only thing I was afraid of was that I might not be able to control myself, and then something irreparable might happen. Are you done yet? I see you have no idea what the term alpha male means. Shall I try to explain it to you? I'm as alert as a wolf before I leap. Sandra Lover ironically smirked, clearly not noticing the change in me. Well, listen. I stepped forward and hit the alpha male in the face with my right fist. There was a distinctive crunch of cartilage and teeth knocked out. The lover fell to the floor and an expression of utter amazement showed clearly on the undamaged part of his face. I lifted him to his feet, but immediately hit him again with an uppercut to the solar plexus. This time the alpha bent in half, trying to catch his breath. I pushed him away and kicked him in the groin with my boot. The lover fell to the floor, crawled into a corner, and whimpered pitifully. Alpha, it would be very nice if you'd stop squealing. Apparently there was something animalistic in my gaze that he immediately shut up. The term alpha male refers to a predator. He is the one who tells everyone else what to do. I tried my best to control my anger. He may not be the smartest or even the biggest beast, but he is the one who will kill without the slightest hesitation. He's absolutely ruthless, and you, jerk, don't even come close to that. You can be the alpha in the small world of your glamorous, air-conditioned office with the secretaries and the metrosexuals, but here in the big world, not only are you no alpha, you're no male at all. You're just another dumb idiot who thinks he's the ruler of the world just because he once found 2 cherries and mistook them for steel balls. You didn't even bring any witnesses, you an idiot. You probably want to call the police, don't you? Maybe I'll get arrested. Or maybe not. Maybe I'll get bail. Then we'll have another conversation. But with more consequences. You gotta be ready for anything when you sleep with another man's wife. It's up to you, Alpha. Now get out of here and don't get blood and shit all over my hallway. I loaded all my clothes, weapons, and some other personal items into an army duffel bag that easily fit in the trunk. I walked around the apartment one last time to see if I had missed anything. The apartment was now hostile territory. From now on, I had to be vigilant. I've heard that there's a very thin line between love and hate. Perhaps it is. I was more than surprised when I realized that the love I felt for Sandra, by the time our little conversation with her lover was over, was only a fading flame that quickly went out in the days that followed. No, no! Not now! Colonel Razin, the head of the department, even jumped out of his deep chair red with anger. You, what? We have the most work now. 8 unsolved murders, not enough people, and you demand a vacation from me. Not now, maybe in 2 months. Colonel Razin. You didn't let me go in spring, then I asked for one in summer. Now it's late autumn, you say you can't. And when can I go? In winter? I pushed my vacation report in the direction of the chief. The paper glided smoothly over the polished tabletop and stopped exactly opposite the chief's hand. Well, Colonel Razin. Sign it. It's not a big deal, I'll be gone for a month. I'll go out, I'll sort out my affairs, you know me. I looked at the chief and smiled tenderly, you mustn't annoy the madman. The colonel took the pen sluggishly and reluctantly signed it. To hell with you, go. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. It was obvious that the process of signing my report was not easy for him. I quickly picked up the cherished list and rushed to the personnel department. The head of personnel department, Major, who had seen better days, called the Inspector Marina and ordered her to prepare an order about my leave. From tomorrow. The chief personnel officer chewed his lips and immediately lost interest in me. Why tomorrow? Offensively, I stretched out. The report is from today. But then you'll get vacation pay only next week. The head of personnel department grudgingly looked at me. It's all right, I'll survive. I faithfully clapped my eyelids. If it is necessary to press the leaf from the wind, then I'm always there. Marina, make an order from today. The major stood up and opened the door of the adjoining room. In half an hour I sat at the table and signed the order. Inspector Marina stood with her right thigh pressed against my left shoulder. She occasionally leaned over to turn the pages and point out all the places I had to sign. She was even prettier now than she had been at the beginning of my visit to the frames, and even longer-legged. I could see that she was not only a gorgeous blonde, but that she also had an adorable bust that stood out beautifully on her blouse. She also smelled of an expensive perfume that made my head spin and made me think sinful thoughts. In addition, she was massaging my left side with her body, making the situation even worse. Finally, everything that needed to be done was signed. I took one copy of the order to the accounting department and began to say goodbye to the hospitable staff. In the eyes of Marina, I saw regret, or maybe it just seemed to me. Despite the crash of my marriage, my mood has improved. Ahead of me was a month of solitude, during which I will gather my thoughts and figure out a plan for life. Right now I wanted only one thing, to get out of the city as quickly as possible. I had a house in an abandoned village, a remnant of my grandmother. When I was a kid, I used to spend my summer vacations there, while my parents went to the sea on vacation. My grandmother, Maria, would give me steamed milk and shake her head sorrowfully at my protruding bones. They had starved the child to death. She lamented, shaking her head sorrowfully. My grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, and no one had lived in the house since then. And it was wonderful. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to anyone. When I arrived at my friend's house, where I was temporarily staying, I saw an unfamiliar car parked near the driveway. An unknown man was sitting behind the wheel. On the right, in the passenger seat, was Sandra. She got out of the car and waved at me hesitantly before coming over. Her face was full of emotions, including a bit of fear, shame, guilt, and apprehension. Her face looked puffy and blotchy, indicating that she had cried a lot and slept very little. We must talk. She began without preamble. Maybe you do, but I don't need to. I shrugged my shoulders indifferently and opened the door. I beg you, calm down. Sandra looked at me with tears in her eyes. Edward, please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you angry or hurt you. I can't believe how cruel you were to Vadim. He's in the hospital with injuries right now. He has a broken jaw and a shattered testicle. Why did you have to hurt him like that? Saying all this, Sandra theatrically clasped her hands. For God's sake, just listen to me. Please, Edward, let me in, and we can discuss how to get through this. I understand that yesterday's jerk's name was Vadim. I wonder if he filed a police report. Although, if he's in the hospital, the message went out anyway. Sandra, there's one thing I don't understand. Have you had a stroke, or are you on pills, or maybe I just never knew how small and pathetic you really are? Either way, it doesn't matter at this point anymore. I want you to get the hell out of here. Go see your freak in the hospital, and make sure you remind him of what will happen if a single word about yesterday's events reaches me from the police or anyone else. I took a step into the doorway, but Sandra grabbed my hand, probably still hoping for something. Edward, I'm so sorry for what I did. I don't know how I let Vadim suggest to you that I have a night with him. You must have thought I was crazy, and I probably was for a while. But now I'm back, and I love you and want only you, and I ask you to forgive me, and I promise that I will be the best wife you could ever have, and I will spend my life making it up to you. I beg you, at least forgive me for my son's sake. You loved me, didn't you? Sandra was already sobbing at the top of her voice. The neighbors were already staring at us. Darling, I want you. I want to come home and be your wife for the rest of our lives. I want you to forgive me. I'll do anything to make it up to you. We can get through this and be better than ever. I have decided that you are the only one I could ever love, and I need you to forgive me. Sandra. I've said it all. If our paths cross in the future, let's just say hello, but keep walking by. I released my hand. What about my son? She voiced her final argument. He's an adult, he'll figure it out on his own. And if he doesn't figure it out, then, I didn't finish. I just looked at her, walked into the entryway and closed the door. I remember that I loved her, but it was already like an echo wandering through mountain gorges. At first it is strong and bright, but as it echoes off the sheer cliffs, it fades to a whisper, and then it dies. The abandoned village in which I had temporarily settled was right on the border of the reserve. About 100 meters beyond the outskirts, on the road leading to the pushcha, there was a sign prohibiting car traffic, as well as passage with a gun or a dog. Nothing should disturb the wild inhabitants of the reserved wood. The weather was lousy. A gray overcast crept over the sky and from time to time spilled nasty little rain on the ground. Then, closer to evening, frost was creeping up. But despite the inclement weather, I was happy. No, not happy. How can one be happy after the meanness of his wife's betrayal? But quite calm, not hysterical or desperate. I had something to occupy myself with. Chop some firewood, stack it in the old, crooked barn so it wouldn't get wet in the rain. Cook a meal, heat the banya. Drink 100 grams at last. Not a tricky man's weakness. After a week I was almost out of food and one day I went to the nearest village for fresh meat. When I went into a country store, a saleswoman eyeing my camouflage jacket with apprehension for a long time. Then, as if reluctantly began to lay out the products on the counter. When I asked about the whiskey she seemed to fall into a stupor and was unavailable for some time. Then, as if remembering something, dug under the counter and pulled out 3 bottles of vodka. I was already sitting behind the wheel, remembering whether I had bought everything, when I heard some noise. A man swearing and a woman's crying. I looked in the rear mirror and saw 2 men kicking a woman of unknown age. They seemed to be fighting over a bottle. But one thing confused me, they were kicking very violently a woman who was practically unresisting. I also thought, this is what she needs. Root out this Eva's seed. How much grief from them. But the sight of a woman being beaten, not resisting her tormentors, just silently covering her body with her hands from the kicking feet, stirred something in my soul. I got out of the car and approached the inquisitors. That's enough, men. You can kill her that way. I pushed the drunken males away with my hand. The woman, curled up in a ball, was lying still on the ground. And who are you? Why are you meddling? One of the men turned to me and began to press his skinny chest. Get out of here, that's my woman. Othello. I was so angry, I immediately wanted to punch this woodpecker in the face. But I tried to calm down. If it's your woman, why are you hitting so hard? You'll kill her. What's it to you? The man tried to focus on me. But his drunken childhood and partial personality degradation did not allow him to do so to the fullest extent. One eye of the man was looking at me, and the other, regardless of the first, was wandering around my car. I even shuddered at this phenomenon. And when a simple country boy took me by the breasts to teach me some local politeness, I didn't hit him hard with 2 palms on the ears. This uncomplicated therapeutic technique had a sobering effect on the guy. He grunted like a pig and began to slowly sink to the frozen ground. The second educator, without engaging in a discussion, hurriedly retreated to a previously prepared position. A police car had just parked outside the store. The car door opened with a creak and the foot of the policeman stepped onto the sinful ground. It was a fascinating sight. The drunken policeman's face, who had forgotten to zip up, blended in seamlessly with the rural landscape. Staggering and burping drunkenly, the village policeman came toward me, trying to unbutton his holster, which had slipped down over the bare belly that protruded from beneath his uniform. What the hell had I gotten myself into trouble for again? Who was this woman to me? Maybe she deserved it. What do I want more than anybody else? I stepped to meet the sheriff, pushed his head back with an open palm, and held his falling body with my left hand. I gently lowered it to the ground, went through my pockets, and pulled out my ID, Mark Connor, Police Lieutenant, District Inspector. He gently unclenched the policeman's fingers and pulled out his pistol from its holster. And at that moment something fell on my head, and immediately night fell. When I came to, I found myself leaning against the dilapidated fence that encloses the front garden of the store. The saleswoman's face was leaning over me. "You are awake," she muttered with a sort of relief. "Katya did a great job on you." She nodded at a piece of large latticework lying nearby. I touched my head, and a big bump grew in my hair, clotted with blood. Suddenly I remembered about the car. What was wrong with it? But when I turned around, I saw the steel horse standing peacefully. The salesgirl seemed to read my mind. "It's okay, don't worry. They ran away as you fell down. And the cop, too, left, said to get help. So, come on, get out of here before there was trouble." She helped me get up and walk to the car. I opened the door and made sure everything was in place. I got in the driver's seat and started the engine. "Thanks for all your help. I didn't even know your name." I smiled through my strength. My head really hurt with a twitching pain. "My name is Olga." "And you live in Antonovka?" "Yes, my grandmother left me the house." I waved my hand and drove off. In the rearview mirror I saw Olga raise her hand, saying goodbye to me. At home I washed the wound with peroxide and somehow bandaged my head. It seems that soon guests will come. They would find me quickly, especially since I did not hide the place of my refuge. Well, I had nothing to fear. My house papers are in order. I have my passport and my service credentials with me. I hid my rifle in the basement just in case. You never know. I cooked dinner and waited. After about 2 hours I heard the sound of the engine. It looks like they were coming, dear guests. The engine stopped before reaching the house about 50 meters. Through the holes in the half-decayed fence I saw several policemen making their way toward my house. The house is surrounded. "Come out with your hands up," somebody yelled into the speaker. "Special Forces, my 5th place." I cautiously stepped out onto the porch with my hands above my head. I held my card in my right hand. From behind the gate the old district policeman came out. "Well, I've got you, you jerk." He was overjoyed. He ran up to me and tried to wring my hands. He paid no attention to my ID card. The brave captain followed him onto the stage. "Get him in the car," he said in a command voice, well placed. They did not seem to have heard about the handcuffs. I waited, without taking any action against the policeman. "Comrade Captain," came a loud voice from behind the fence, "Major Gorokov, urgently." The captain was torn between the desire to take revenge on me for his subordinate and the conversation with his superiors. At last he decided in favor of the superior. He ran out of the yard and rushed to his car. In 15 minutes he was back. On his face spread the seal of disappointment. The prey had slipped away. He came up to me and took my ID card in his hands. He looked at it for a long time, sniffed at it, and seemed to want to taste it. Finally, with regret, he gave it back to me. "Excuse me, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. There's been a mistake." And to the policeman let go of his hands, "Connor." The policeman didn't understand anything. He opened his mouth, but ran into the captain's steely gaze. "Guys, come in the house," I said in a friendly manner. "Let's drink to the acquaintance." The captain visibly revived. "Connor, get the driver." In an hour we were best friends. Connor even apologized for the goat. I showed the captain the rifle. He just waved his hand and graciously allowed me to walk around the park with it. For a good man anything is possible. Apparently, the permit system in these Palestinians was notable for its unprecedented liberalism. We parted before dark. We bade farewell for a long time and swore eternal friendship. Finally, the sound of the moonwalker faded into the distance behind the village. I closed the door and collapsed on my bed. Early in the morning I boiled water and brewed coffee. There were crows cawing in the street. I went out on the porch with a cup in my hand. A large flock of crows was circling high above the house. It came swiftly toward the ground, then soared upward, almost disappearing in the cloud-covered sky. I sighed and pulled out my phone. There was no network. On the one hand it is good, no one bothers me, on the other hand it is difficult to live isolated from everything. and I was going to live as a hermit. I was not long enough. I hear the growing sound of a car engine. Who the hell is that? I had no desire to talk to anyone, especially after a sleepless night. A police car stopped in front of my house and Connor got out. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. You were urgently asked to call at work." Connor looked me devotedly in the eyes. "All right, I'll come to the station right away." I poured the half-drunk coffee. "Come inside." "Thank you, I'll be right back." Connor got back behind the wheel, the car turned around and bounced on the bumps and rushed back. "What happened there?" I put on my jacket and started warming up the car. "How are you out there in the middle of nowhere? You got here yet?" I heard my supervisor chuckle. "Here's the thing. I got a call from the prosecutor's office. There's a complaint about you from Citizen Cokekin. You beat his son very badly. He is in hospital now. The Gestapo has opened a case against you. Anyway, stop fooling around, it's a serious matter. I'll see you this afternoon. Can you make it? Is it that bad?" I looked at the policeman sitting across from me. It could not be worse. The city greeted me with dampness, herds of cars scurrying along the streets, and the fire of obtrusive advertising. "Are you out of your mind? Do you know how this is going to end for you?" The chief was running around the office from corner to corner, nervously rubbing his hands together. "The prosecutor's office is demanding that you be suspended from work. They're going to open a criminal case. You made that jerk an invalid. You threatened him." I could see the chief was really upset. "How can I let you do your job? Who's going to clean up your mess?" The questions were hanging in the air. Suddenly the chief calmed down. "So here's the deal. You'll be temporarily, you hear, temporarily, transferred to the inspection of corrections. A simple inspector. Stay quiet and keep your head down. Time will pass, things may settle down. You'll be back in the department. In the meantime..." "You got it." The colonel leaned back in his chair. "Go to the staff and sign the order. From tomorrow you go to your new duty station." I stood up. "Permission to go?" The chief waved his hand. The job at the new place was a piece of cake. I was in charge of several parolees. 7 people in all. Once a week they came to me and told me how they were adapting to their new lives. Out of idleness, I went through their files. One thing interested me. Monica Collins. 35 years old. Divorced. Served 8 years. Served 6. Car accident with grave consequences. DUI drove and killed 3 people. A young family. She was convicted. Husband divorced a year later and got custody of her only daughter, who was 13 at the time. Aha. So she's 19 now. I mean daughter. Monica currently lives with her sister in a 2-room apartment. Her husband and her 3 children live there with her. I wonder where she sleeps. In the closet? I spent a long time leafing through the file, rereading the witnesses' statements. Something was bugging me. This case reeked of shit. Well, it's in the past. I quickly explained to Collins her rights and duties, let her sign in the right places. She didn't look like a murderer. Some helplessness shone through in all her movements. Well, that's often the case after a stint in prison. People adapt to free life in different ways. I explained to the probationer that if she commits a crime, she will go to prison with a new term and the old one not served. She seemed to understand. After asking her a few more unimportant questions, I let her go with God. I had enough problems of my own. The restless father of the unlucky alpha male bribed investigator. He wanted to put me away so badly his feet itched. He had money. And whoever has money can do anything. Although, to be honest, there was a crime in my actions. Several times Sandra called. But I dropped the calls and then blocked her number altogether. One day I saw her outside the supermarket. She was getting into the car with some junkie. Both the bagman and Sandra were laughing happily. She seemed to have ditched her stupid alpha male and joined the reliable shoulder of the Barker ATM. A month later Sandra and I were divorced. The kid stayed with his mom, which was to be expected. Okay. He would soon be 18, he would decide everything for himself. I lived in a friend's apartment and wondered where to find permanent housing. My case was moving slowly. Apparently my boss had made efforts that if not to get me out, at least to reduce everything to a disciplinary punishment. Once at the beginning of winter, as soon as I just came to work, I was summoned by the head of the inspection. "Collins is yours?" he asked me sternly. "The district police department called. She's stolen a store of the money from a cash register. Go to the department, sort it out and prepare documents. We'll put her in jail again." I went into the stink of human sweat and pain. "Hi, Kurt." It turned out that the duty officer was a good acquaintance of mine. "Hello." "Well, where's the villainess?" I stuck my hand through the window and said hello to the officer on duty. "As usual, in the cage. Will you take away?" The man on duty handed me a pen and a magazine. "Yes, but I'll talk first. Master is the boss." The duty officer laughed. "Romanenko, show the comrade lieutenant colonel out." She sat with her hands between her knees and her head down. When I entered, she only flinched but did not raise her head. "How did you get into the store?" I work there. As a janitor." Monica looked up. A tear rolled down her cheek. I'd seen it 1,000 times before. "So why do you need money?" She was silent for a long time, staring at one point. Then she sighed. "What now?" "My daughter's getting married tomorrow. I wanted to watch." From the side. "Just a little bit. Just a look." But other than that, she nodded at her dirty jeans and her tattered red jacket. "I have nothing to wear. So I took the money from the cash register." She sniffed her nose. "I would have given. I didn't know there was a camera in the hall. A woman and everything." "I see. The old song. All for the orphans and the poor. I don't fall for such fairy tales. You took it for a drink. So you wanted to dress up nicely? So you could sneak into the wedding? To see your daughter?" "No, just to see the wedding. My daughter doesn't even want to see me. She's been told all sorts of things about me. She's got another mother now." Monica covered her face with her hands and sobbed. I smoked a cigarette. "Stay here and don't go anywhere." I went up to the operatives who were on the case. Half an hour later, I went back down to the monkey house and took the prisoner away. "Are we going to jail now?" Monica whispered from the back seat. "Not exactly. There's something else to do." I turned right and parked in front of the boutique. "Get out." Monica got out of the car, looking around in surprise, not understanding what was going on. We went up to the store. We opened the heavy glass door. Quickly, 2 girls came rushing over to us. But the closer they came, the more disappointed they looked. "Is the owner here?" One of the salesgirls nodded. Tell me Rokotov arrived." A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman appeared on the stage as if she had descended from the pages of a glossy magazine. "Edward! What brings you here?" She hugged me and kissed my cheek. "Milena, bring coffee for our guests." At this, she looked a little surprised at Collins, who was standing behind me, shocked by what was happening. "Stella," I hesitated for a second, "my friend needs a dress to go out. She's getting her daughter married tomorrow. Can we help her?" Stella looked at Monica. "No doubt. Come into the fitting room, my dear." Then we visited a spa and other places that make women happy. In the evening, I brought my ward villain back to the hotel. "Get some rest. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Keep in mind," I looked sternly at the woman in prostration. "Just for the signing. Then we take it all back and we go to jail." Monica looked up. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. "I don't know," I honestly answered. The next day, at 10 o'clock sharp, I picked up Monica. When I entered the room, my breath was taken away. Standing in front of me was a dazzlingly beautiful woman. Not even a woman, a lady. I even squeezed my eyes shut with the glow coming from her. I'm ready. Monica smiled at the corners of her lips. But I could see that she was very nervous. The signing took place in a fancy restaurant, in a hall decorated with flowers and colorful balloons. A young girl who looked very much like Monica, accompanied by an elegant man, approached the groom. After a short speech from the registrar, the young couple exchanged rings. "What a beautiful couple," someone said softly behind me. Monica watched the ceremony with her hands clasped to her chest. She wasn't crying, she was happy for her daughter, as only a mother can be. I stood aside, trying not to draw too much attention to myself. The young people were already walking down the exit aisle when the bride suddenly stopped and turned to Monica. "Mother?" Tears suddenly came to her eyes. "Mommy! I am so glad you are here. I've been waiting for you." The bride hugged her mother impetuously, and they stood in silence for a while. "Where have you been all this time? They told me you had left me." But I did not believe it. "Come, I will introduce you to my husband." The girl took Monica by the arm. Behind her back I saw the pale face of a man, apparently a father. He was furious and at the same time confused. He didn't know what to do. "Baby, wait. I can't now, maybe later we can talk." Monica was confused. "No, now, don't leave me. Mama. I'm so happy you're with me." Monica hugged her daughter. "Forgive me, but not now." Monica turned to me. "Thank you for everything. I'm ready, let's go." I took a step back. "I'm sorry, but you've made a mistake. I've never seen you before." I thought for a moment. "You have a wonderful daughter." I turned around, and without looking back, walked quickly to the waiting car. Morning, I woke up feeling cold. A new day was beginning, as dull as any that had gone by. For a long time I remembered where I had hidden a jar of instant coffee and sugar. It turned out there was neither. "All right, I'll drink my coffee at work." My cell phone beeped. I gotta change my ringtone. I quickly got dressed, threw on a black drapey coat and went out to the muddy stairwell. I had recently resolved the housing issue and moved into a one-room apartment in the center of the city a week before. Yes, lucky me. The apartment was on the balance sheet of the Department of Internal Affairs. It used to be a hotel for seconded workers from other cities. Then it stood empty for a long time. It seemed to have been forgotten about. 2 weeks ago, Alia from the maintenance department told me about this apartment. I quickly wrote a tearful report, talked to a couple of important people, and the apartment was assigned to me. By this time I was divorced and there was nothing I could take away from my ex. It looks like she and the dealer all right. Except my son's not working out. The dealer bought him a scooter and my son now rides around town in a new helmet, living on the principle who buys the gifts is the father. And his mom must have done some work, too. Quite a common philosophy in today's idiot world. I'm not gonna run after him and whine. I don't have the temperament. He's a big boy now, and if he traded his father for a scooter, then so be it. To be honest, I was fed up with the hell out of the city. I was drawn back to nature, to my grandmother's house. Such is the way of man, there's always something missing. After all, I had to find out who rattled in the attic. Collins kept coming to see me. I talked to a businessman I knew, and he hired her. He paid her a good salary. I managed to get her off with the help of some cops I knew. I even managed to get her into a dormitory. She and her daughter got on well, and even came to see me a couple of times. The daughter did not recognize me, but it's for the best. But Monica got it into her head that she owed me. Since she had nothing besides her body, she hinted in every way that she wouldn't mind sleeping with me, as a thank you. In principle, I could make love with her a couple of times. But I knew if I let her get under the covers, she would climb on my shoulders after a while. And then that was it, the end of the movie. I'd had enough of family life. So up to now I have been able to beat Monica's attempts. The police and prosecutors had been chewing on my case for a long time, not knowing which way to stick the article. There were no witnesses to the massacre. The stubborn father wrote a statement from his son's words. When they came to question the victim, he refused to explain anything. He only clamped his hand over his cheek. In general, I was muzzled for a while and then told off for something I don't understand. Oh, well. But despite the rehabilitation, I was in no hurry to return to my former position in homicide. My former boss diligently turned his face away when he met me in the corridor. They were probably preparing me for undercover work. Just kidding. Anyway, I continued to sit in the inspection and tick off the names of the inmates. I threw my coat on a hanger to dry and plugged the kettle into a socket. There was a knock on the door. "Can I come in?" Monica's head appeared from behind the door. "You must." I even burned my finger with a splash of boiling water. She sat down across from me and habitually put her hands between my knees. I filled out the magazine and handed her a pen. "Sign." Collins signed it and looked at me. "Edward, we have a corporate party at work soon." She began in a grave voice. "And? May I invite you?" They said to come in pairs. And I haven't had time to get acquainted with anyone yet. Her eyes began to fill with tears. "Edward! Please! Monica, you're a beautiful woman. Can't you find a decent man for yourself? Why do you need a cop? You woman, you cry at the drop of a hat." "I don't need a decent man," Monica said sadly. "There aren't any decent ones. They're all gone when they were puppies." "When's the party?" "November 24th, autumn ball." Monica blotted her dry eyes. "What autumn ball? Is winter on its way?" I smoked. "So will you go?" Monica decided to strike while the iron was hot. "Okay, where to pick you up from?" "You should be at the hostel by 6 in the evening. I'll be waiting at the door." Monica smiled. "Thank you." At exactly 6 o'clock, I pulled up in front of the dormitory. Monica was already waiting for me. Walking around the car, she sat down in the front seat. "It started at 7 o'clock. We'll make it in time," Monica murmured, pretending to be pretty. I said nothing. Somehow she was quickly returning to high society. Music played by a DJ in a large hall decorated with balloons and paper autumn leaves. Now for the first time that evening, I wondered what I was doing here. I wanted more peace and quiet than ever in the countryside, despite the idiot who stomped around in my attic at night. Monica, dressed in her wedding attire, shone, basking in everyone's attention. New friends appeared out of nowhere and quickly pulled her into their circles, leaving me standing on the perimeter. I expected her to keep me close to her, but except for the first few glances back, she seemed to stop paying attention to me. "They don't know you," someone said behind my back. "And they're nervous about what you're showing up with Monica will mean to them." I turned around. Next to me was a young woman with a glass of champagne in her hand. Monica has not been a member of our team for very long, but she has broken more than one man's heart. The stranger took a sip. "Yes, well done, Collins." Quickly got used to it. Honestly, it was so. Monica was standing in the center of a small group of people, and the man standing next to her put his hand on her shoulder. I walked over and stood next to Monica. She was talking to the man whose hand was still on her shoulders. She hesitated and was silent when she sensed my presence. She turned around to see who was standing there, her lips pressed tightly together, the smile on them beginning to fade. Then there was a bright light in her eyes again when she saw me. She shrugged, removing the hand resting on them, and took a step toward me. "Monica, who is that?" the man asked. I don't think he appreciated my intervention, at least I could tell by the look of anger that flashed across his face. He tried to hug her again, but she stopped him. "This is my good friend." She said it in a tone that left no doubt that we were more than friends. The man narrowed his eyes, looked at her for a moment, and then walked away. A quiet but harsh hung in the air. The rest of the group stared at me, and I smiled back at them. It was easy to see that they weren't comfortable with me, an outsider who came out of nowhere. Monica tried to somehow introduce me to the people she worked with, but it was obvious that they belonged to a different world that I had little interest in. Talking about people I didn't know and, frankly, didn't want to know wasn't interesting to me, and I took the opportunity to go to the bar in search of a decent drink. I waved to the bartender and ordered a vodka and orange juice. I took the offered glass and leaned my back against the bar, watching Monica. She was indeed the most beautiful of all the women around her. Monica was in the middle of a small group of men, none of whom I recognized. Obviously, they were no strangers to her, as she felt very comfortable in their presence. She was laughing and even flirting with the men, approaching them closely. The thought flashed through my head again, what am I doing here? A loud laugh reached me in a musical pause. Monica lifted her cheek, and the young man kissed her. Her head turned a little farther, and she noticed that I was watching her. She saw the look on my face and moved away from her companions, leaving them surprised. The stranger took a step to follow her, then stopped, watching her. Her face lit up with a broad smile, and she almost ran, hurrying toward me. "Do you miss me?" Monica asked with a smile that couldn't hide a hint of concern. I shrugged my shoulders. I just wanted to get out of here already. Her face lowered and she looked back at the group of people she had just left, a guilty expression on her face as she realized that I had been standing here for over half an hour or so. "Why didn't you come over and join us?" she asked. I raised my eyebrows. "Monica, since you and I are friends, let's get to you." I was there, but after the first few moments, you and your friends ignored me, so I saw no point in standing there as a spare peg. I raised my glass and took a sip, so I found myself entertained. Monica looked embarrassed and swallowed a couple of times. The evening was winding down. I walked over to Monica with my clothes on. She was standing with her back to me talking to the guy. Her attention shifted to me. She nodded briefly and announced that she was leaving. "You're coming with me." The guy grabbed her arm. "Young man." The lady said she was leaving. I tried to be as polite as possible, but somewhere deep inside me there was a fire of rage. Frankly, my fists had been itching and I felt the need to stretch myself. Especially since I was already sick of the glamorous faces around me. "Edic, I'm sorry if you misunderstood me, but I'm going home." Monica babbled, terrified, and snatched her hand away. The expression on the man's face became the face of a child who had lost his favorite toy. For some reason I got the impression that he was not used to having his proposals rejected. But no sooner had we entered the parking lot when this Edic and his friends caught up with us. His previously smiling face now sported a grimace of rage. He walked over to Monica and brought his face close to hers. "You won't say no when I ask you to join me and you get in my car," he said with a low hiss. "You will be mine for the night because I have decided so." Honestly, I felt joyful excitement. Finally! It looked like my unrealized rage and anger would be released. The girl said, "No, uncle." I pushed Monica behind my back. I was now face to face with Edic the freak. A moment later, out of the corner of my eye, I saw his fist fly right into my face. I took a step to the side. When I finished landing, the cheeky Edic flew out of the parking lot and crashed into the wall of a building about 3 meters away from me, thanks to a spinning kick. But, of course, no one but me saw it coming. My opponent was lying there unconscious, but his left leg was twitching funny. A puddle was spreading under the motionless body. It looked like Edic had wet himself. "Knockout," someone said. I picked up Monica and in a few moments we were already rushing along a snow-covered avenue in my car. I turned on the receiver. The horoscope for the coming week was on. The era of the fish was coming to an end. With a joyful voice the presenter ranted. "Our world is entering the Aquarius era. The reign of the fish is coming to an end. What is your horoscope?" I turned my head to Monica. "Pisces. Born in March." She was quiet and added, "On the 10th. And on the 7th. It's fate." I laughed. That night, of course, Monica spent in my bed. My feet did not go unnoticed. It was clearly visible on the surveillance cameras. In the morning, wet himself, Edic filed a complaint with the police department, colorfully describing how I had made fun of his motionless body. The statement went through, and by lunchtime the guys from the IAB had already suspended me. You should have seen their enlightened and happy faces. My criminal actions were deemed malicious hooliganism, but the case did not go to trial. I was simply offered to quietly walk away. So I did. "Thank you for not demoting me." There was nothing for me to do in the city, so I went to my grandmother's house, having bought a couple of traps for big game in a hunting store. After all, I'm supposed to find out who rattles around in the attic at night. P.S. A week later Monica found me. But that's another story. Epilogue. When Monica showed up at my house I had a double feeling. On the one hand I was glad to see her, but on the other hand it was clear that as long as a woman was in the house my free life was over. Women have a rare gift that is unique to them. They manage to create the conditions for the enslavement of men in a short time, while remaining free. There seems to be no pressure, everything takes its course. But you begin to notice that the cup is in a different place, that the clothes are in the closet, but you won't find anything in your pockets. The reproachful looks, the manic urge for order and cleanliness. Wake up early in the morning. But you're starting to get the stares. You're lying there, and I'm working hard. Even though all she does is drink coffee and read a glossy magazine. And there is no hiding from the all-seeing gaze of her friend. I wonder if women are like that when they are alone with themselves, or it is only for men. With the arrival of Monica there were curtains on the windows, white with blue flowers. I almost burst into tears. Somewhere behind the closet Monica found a doormat. And now there was the need to wipe my feet. Don't wear dirt. I'm cleaning. All that time I was tormented by thoughts of some wrongness. Something had happened that had escaped my consciousness. Something that I had missed, but which had settled in the back of my mind. Then there was a sense of danger. It was unclear where it was coming from, but it was growing, and sometimes I wanted to scream in helplessness. Even hot nights of love couldn't calm me down. Something was happening all around me, but I couldn't figure out what. Then the picture got sharper, but I still couldn't figure it out. A couple of days ago I went to the village to see Connor. We sat and talked and I casually asked him about Monica. How did he like her? At first Connor didn't understand, but then he was surprised. There was no Monica. He never told anyone about me, because no one was interested. The first bell rang, a small, thin one. I never told anyone where I was hiding from people. And Monica neither. She wasn't at Connor's. How did she know where I was in Granny's house? Something was coming up. Told Collins I had to go to town to deal with alimony. I drove up to the inspectorate, talked to the clerk. I asked to ask for Collins's case from the colony, not the whole case, but the plot. The lieutenant looked at me in surprise, but promised to do it and send it to me on WhatsApp. I went to see Monica's daughter. What was my surprise when I was told at the address that the tenants, young people, had gone abroad. It was getting hotter. A couple of days later I went back to the village, supposedly for groceries. I had to look at Monica's forwarded personal file in WhatsApp. The car wouldn't start, so I had to walk to the village. To shorten the way I walked through the woods. The personnel file was as it should be. I had already seen it when I was keeping a surveillance sheet. Nothing new, except for one thing, there was a completely different woman in the picture. I was shocked. Who was living with me? Who was I sleeping with? Why is she with me? I had no answer to these questions yet. Except the feeling of danger wasn't ringing in my head, it was roaring like a siren. As I walked, it grew darker, and soon the yellow-blue moon took its place in the sky. I stopped and had a smoke. I rummaged in my backpack and took out a flashlight. I took out a German bayonet knife and fixed it on my belt. Suddenly I felt that I was not alone on the path. A light wind had risen and it seemed to me that the branches were reaching out to me like hands with crooked fingers, trying to grab me by my clothes. I looked up, and in the dark sky, the winged silhouette of a crow flew up and disappeared among the branches. Strangely, it was not his time. At that moment, there was an owl screech somewhere high up. I do not know why, but I suddenly felt uncomfortable. There was a viscous silence in the evening forest. Strange. Even the wind stopped swaying the tops of the pines. I put out my cigarette, fixed my backpack, and walked down the path again. No sooner had I taken a couple of steps than the silence was broken by a wild howl, furious and angry. I even flinched in surprise. My first thought was to run as fast as I could toward home. But I managed to pull myself together. I walked slowly forward, when the shrieking sounded again, only much closer. I accelerated my step, knowing that I could not run on the slippery trail. It was quiet again, only my heavy breathing could be heard. And then I felt someone's unkind gaze on me from the thicket of the forest. I was even covered with a cold, clammy sweat of fear. My heart was beating convulsively in my throat, and it was hard to breathe. I put my bayonet out in front of me, trying to see something in the darkness. I had even forgotten about the flashlight, or I hadn't, I was just afraid to turn it on. In the other, everything changed. The bushes moved again. Only now the unknown beast was walking away. So it seemed to me. To the right of the path, heavy footsteps were heard and someone's hoarse voice said, "Who's there?" I finally turned on the flashlight. Standing in front of me was a tall old man with a gray beard up to his ears. "Are you all right, lad?" He covered his eyes with his hand. "Take the flashlight away, you're blinding my eyes." I sank slowly to the ground, leaning my back against the trunk of a pine tree. My hands were still shaking. I tried to smoke, but I couldn't reach my cigarette. "What was that?" I asked the stranger. "Who knows? The place is remote, not many people. God only knows what's wandering around here." Or, the old man didn't finish. We were silent for a while. "All right, I'll go." The old man looked at me, and for a second I thought he was scanning my soul. "And you give back what you took, it's not good to take someone else's things." While I was digesting what he said, the figure of a stranger disappeared into the darkness. And what to give? I did not take anything. But in response was only silence. The sound of an owl echoed again, and the night forest came alive. Suddenly the forest ended, and I stepped into a clearing shrouded in a whitish, thick fog, like steamed milk. Stunted pine trees and the tops of stone crosses protruded from this milk. The place was familiar. I stepped forward and stopped in front of the central, biggest cross. A white crow was sitting on its crossbeam. It was turning its head, and seemed to be looking at me. I even felt a little creepy, the way it looked at me was very meaningful. And then it finally dawned on me. On my neck of my mother's gold chain hung a golden cross, which I found here in this clearing. I took the chain and the amulet from my neck and carefully placed them on the granite bar. The crow caught at me warily, and then cawed and flew away with the flapping of its wings. The fog was gradually lifting. I could see the trees and the edge of the forest. I passed the crosses and went forward to the edge of the clearing. There was a path. Trying not to slip, I walked briskly toward the house. Monica pressed herself against my chest, tears in her eyes. I could see that she was worried about me. Quickly she gathered breakfast. I ate and immediately went to bed. Tiredness was a heavy burden on my shoulders. When I woke up, the house was quiet. The clock on the wall was ticking, the stove was heating. I sat on the edge of the bed. Everything seemed to be as usual, but something was missing. Suddenly I realized there was no Monica. I called out for her several times, but in vain. She didn't answer. I looked around. Her things had disappeared from the room. There was a note on the table. "I can't tell you everything, but I really loved you. Goodbye. N." Next to it was my gold chain. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Snow was falling on the ground in white flakes. Winter had finally set in. I was still living in the middle of nowhere. The fussing in my attic at night had stopped. It's still a mystery to me who it was. No one else came to me at night. I tried several times to find the strange clearing with the stone crosses. But in vain, it seemed to have sunk that day in a white mist. And another thing. Sometimes at night I dream of Monica. What do you think of our story today? It seems to me that in this story it was a real act of a man. I would have done exactly the same thing if I were him and not put up with it all. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.